Most of you will be familiar with YouGov polls. I want to tell you about a recent one, not about the general election in 2 days' time, but about taboos. It found that physical health, 62%, marriage and relationships, 50%, and death, 49%, are the issues that UK adults find most uncomfortable discussing with friends and family. More than half of Britons in relationships don't know their partner's end-of-life wishes. Isn't it strange that we get hooked on watching serial murders like Midsummer Murders and Agatha Christie's Miss Marple on the telly, and crime thrillers are among Amazon's bestsellers, but we try to avoid talking about death? It wasn't always like this. In late Victorian times, when average life expectancy was around 48, death was more openly talked about. Nowadays, when life expectancy is so much higher, we prefer to talk about topics that prolong life: healthy eating, exercise, reducing stress, all the things that will help us live longer, and forget about the inevitability of death. But we all go through the same 7 stages of man: spills, drills, thrills, bills, ills, pills, and wills. Over the years at Edgware US, we have not shied away from taboo subjects. We have had sessions on dementia, domestic violence, and mental illness, to name just a few. Occasionally, people feel that some of the topics can be deadly serious and induce a big sleep. So if this series is not destined to come to a sticky end, to take a last bow and peg out, I intend to make the ultimate sacrifice and include livelier topics that will take it to a better place. Which brings me to tonight's subject: talking about death won't kill you, a humorous look at the world of the Burial Society. Our guest speaker, Melvyn Hartog, who has been the head of United Synagogue Burial since 2002, says that his talk will let us see the light-hearted, beautiful and dignified side of an inevitable journey. He previously spent 20 years in financial services, as well as service in the Royal Navy, which I have already mentioned. He was a prison chaplain for over 20 years and is a member of the Home Office Burial and Cremations Advisory Committee. I'm sure that we're going to get fascinating insights into the US Burial Society tonight. As one elderly person who saw an advertisement for a burial plot was heard to say, "This is the last thing I need," Melvyn will confirm that it is.
Let's kick this off then, because the title actually was very strange tonight, because it's really talking about death won't kill you, but working for the Burial Society might. So I've got to be very careful. Okay, just to recap a little bit what Spencer said, I'm 71. Actually, that's why I normally wait for a pause of disbelief, that people don't realise I'm 71. I'm married with 2 daughters, which one of them is here. Which is nice to see you, and my niece is here as well. One of my daughters has got 4 daughters. I'm surrounded by women. I learned something very quick in my youth. My first disappointment was that my brother passed his 11 plus, who's 18 months older than me, and got this beautiful briefcase. And I, of course, failed mine and got nothing. So it really taught me very quickly that my brother was the clever one. At school, my headmaster, when I was 15, he said to me, "Melvyn, you've got a choice here. You either leave or we'll kick you out." So I left. And eventually I finished up, signing up for the Royal Navy, where I did 8.5 years, trained as a radar operator. On my discharge, I did the Knowledge of London, become a London taxi driver. And then I went into financial services for over 20 years, as you've said. I come from a very irreligious family, okay, which I'm always willing to admit to. I don't hide it. My Sunday mornings was a really good fry-up. Diane and Troy hasn't got a clue what a fry-up is, but I know exactly what it is. But I think it helps me when you're dealing with families of all different spectrums, so you can see one side or the other side. I can sit right in the middle. My father died in 1986. And I went to shore for about a month or 6 weeks, and then got bored because I wasn't a shore goer, and then I stopped going. My mother died on Yom Kippur in 1994. That was the start, because I went to shore, I started going in the mornings, in the evenings, and there was a couple of people there that encouraged me, and slowly you do get brought in to sort of go into shore more often, and also I then started taking some of the services, and that's it. And then just about a year later, as I was finished, my father-in-law passed away, so I did another year. And you're really into it then on your second year. In October 2001, I was encouraged to apply for the position of head of burial. I knew nothing about burial. My whole life has been dealing with people. And at the end of the day, I think the Burial Society, that's all they wanted. Somebody who understood people. Because they were just finishing off a fraud trial for £1.5 million. So, and we all knew what the Burial Society was like then. Could I have the funeral at 2:00? No, I can't do that. Yes, I can fit that in. You know, it's how much dropsy are you going to give the person? It's the same with stone settings. It was the same as when you went for a funeral, the car door, the limousine, the superintendent is there holding onto the door. I hope everything is all right, hand out, and that's it. You went to do a funeral saying, I need money for this, and I need money for that one, and here and there, and that's what it was, okay? The first thing I did in the first week, I made it a disciplinary offence to take a gratuity. We increased the bearer's salary to take that into account. I wanted people to go to a funeral or a stone setting and just worry about their loved ones. That to me is the most important thing. So what are we all about? What is the United Synagogue about? I talk about 13 cemeteries, although we've only got 11 in London, but we've also picked up Sheffield and Birmingham. So most of our cemeteries, apart from Dover and Aldershot, are within the M25. The four main ones, what I call operational, is Waltham Abbey for the northeast of London, and we've got northwest, we've got Bushey, we've also got Willesden, and we've got East Ham, but they do very few funerals. I'm responsible for a budget of around £5.1 million. Okay, so we do talk a lot of money, but what is our job? There you go. Our job is to actually, apart from, let's take looking after families away, our job is also to make money for the organisation. Because the United Synagogue has got to survive. They can't survive just on your shul fees. So they have to make extra money. There's two departments that make money. That is kashrut and burial, okay? So I'll come on later, how do we make money? We've got just over 60 staff in the Burial Society, with all the cemeteries. Everything is in-house. When I started, they outsourced everything. I bought everything in-house, so we bought our own ambulances and we've got our own drivers and everything else. Our coffins, we get them from Newcastle and they're made of paper, but we don't tell people because then they say, can I have the Telegraph, can I have the Daily Mail? So we do it. So we do it in 2018, we did 844 funerals. In 2017, we actually did 908, so we had a drop. And for 2019, we are projecting 800. We've got another drop. Now, when you pay your funeral expenses scheme, it goes into this huge pot. When somebody dies, we take out of that pot currently £3,500. So if we are down 100 funerals, we're down £350,000. That's how our budget is affected. Now, don't believe everything you hear that I go around to nursing homes and open all the windows in the winter. Although my mother-in-law has just gone into a nursing home, at least so I've got an in to be able to go around visiting. Okay, so what do we do? Actually, when I think about it, the Federation do less than 200 funerals and it does do less than 100. We are the largest in Europe. There's no question, there's not another organisation to touch us. So when we get the first call, we have to decide, is this person a member, where they're a member of, have they got a reserved grave, are they going to be buried what we call rotation burial, which is the next death, next burial. So that is all being taken care of. Then we have to arrange for them to be picked up by our ambulances. This is obviously if it's during the day and everything else, and they've got all their paperwork. So the most important people are going to come into the equation now. And the most important people we have are the Chevra Kadisha. Now, Edgware is blessed with a very, very good Chevra Kadisha. Okay, to me, they are the most important people in the world. To me, they should be on the highest platform that we have. Reason being, they don't look for things. They don't look for payment. They come, they get a call, they come, they do their job, and they leave. I term them as the burial SAS. No fuss. They just come, they do it, and then go. And they really are sort of outstanding people. And what really hit me when I first started, I went into the mortuary at Waldham Abbey, and there is a prayer that they recite at the end, asking the deceased for forgiveness if they've done anything to offend them. And that makes you feel very humble, the sort of job that these people do. It used to be more of a secret society, but I think it's actually come out now more in the open. If you want to know about Tahara, you can go on the internet and just put Tahara and it'll tell you how to do it. But it always used to be hidden. So now it's come out in the open a lot more. Whilst everything is going on, a grave has to be dug, so let's say it's on rotation. Where it's on rotation, we can actually get a digger in there, which we can dig a grave in half hour. So everything would then be ready. We've also got, when you arrive at Bushy Old, I'm not talking about Bushy New now, Bushy Old, you've got a notice board that tells you what's going on where. And somebody actually complained to me right at the beginning, it looks like a departure board at an airport. I said, well, it is a departure board, let's be fair about it. And it was very kindly donated by Helen Abrahams and her son Lincoln, who died in the tsunami in 2004, which was sort of really sad. Also near there, we have a defibrillator, which some people might think it's a bit late, but it's really for visitors. One of the other things we had, that sometimes people die at inconvenient times. It's the old saying, isn't it? You died at the wrong time. But we had a situation when I first started that a woman phoned up that her husband on the Sunday, the office is shut, and she phoned me on the Monday and said, I was stepping over my husband, I didn't know what to do, I had nobody to speak to. And put yourself in that position, that's quite a horrendous situation for a woman on her own, having to deal with her husband. So I had a meeting with the then chair of the Chevra, and we decided to start this nightline. And this nightline takes something around 500 or 700 calls a year. And there can be all sorts of times after the office is shut. So they could get a call at 6 o'clock, they get a call at 10 o'clock at night, they get a call at 2 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning. Because when somebody loses a loved one and they want to talk to somebody for advice only, they want to hear a human voice. And that to me is one of the most important things. The problem we've got, the only major problem, is the person has a very strong French accent. And it must be very strange for a man to phone up at 3 o'clock in the morning and the person says, hello, how can I help you? Because I guarantee he'll think he's got a wrong number. But she did have a couple of examples which she's very kindly given me. A man called informing us that his mother-in-law was very poorly and might die in the next few hours. Could he book the funeral for Sunday afternoon? It was explained to him, very nicely I'm sure, that we do not book funerals before the person is dead. He phoned back on Saturday evening telling us she is still hanging on, but all being well, could we still have the funeral on Sunday afternoon? It's also, I like these examples, I think they're really, sorry. You have a different sense of humour when you work with death every day. A gentleman phoned from a hospital after his father passed away, wanted to know where he could find a Tehillim so he can say some next to his deceased father. As he was in a hospital which had a Shabbos room, we were able to direct him, for which he was very grateful and thankful. He phoned a few minutes later to ask what other services we provide at 3 a.m, but he was reassured we only give advice. Here comes the French accent again, not sure what he had in mind. Before Shabbos or Yontif, we get a considerable amount of calls. People are very concerned and aware that no one will answer the phone, and they ask what they need to do if their dear one passes away over that time. We explain and give the number of a non-Jewish independent undertaker, and that's McLean's, who I tell you are absolutely brilliant and very, very respectful to our members. We explain that we do not make any arrangements while people are alive. He was very insistent and asked to book the 3 p.m. slot on Sunday afternoon. Again, he was told no arrangements while people are alive. He promised to call back after Shabbos, which he did, and to his great surprise, he told us that his mother-in-law was still with us, but nevertheless, he wants us to keep the 3 p.m. slot on Sunday for his mother-in-law's funeral. He then realised that nothing can be done yet, so he had one last question. All being well, what is the latest time the mother-in-law needs to die in order to get the 3 p.m. slot? We did say she might get a full recovery. Well, the mother-in-law did oblige and live for a few more weeks. But she's very happy about that. I'm sure, this is a serious one. I'm sure you'll all remember the tsunami, as I just touched on the 26th of December, 2004. It was during the winter holidays, and many people were caught up in it and called us to ask for help how to find their dear ones. And all but one of these, which one of these unfortunately happened to be Lincoln Abrahams, were found alive, and we helped the family of the young man who perished in this tragedy to be repatriated and buried in our cemetery. Then you get someone who has booked a holiday and is very perturbed that a parent might die and will spoil their holiday, and inquires how long are we prepared to wait for the funeral to take place. They are only away for 2 weeks. We would suggest cancelling a holiday, but it is not the preferred option. They are not too happy when we say we bury as fast as we can, preferably within 2 days. We are dealing with all sorts of people and many varied emotions. So you can see she really has to deal with some very, very strange calls. So talking about dying at the wrong time, we are not a 24-hour service. Okay, we're a 9 till 5, sometimes 9 till 6. We will get people working overtime if it means going and picking up a loved one later on in the afternoon. If a person dies in a private hospital or a nursing home, those places want the person gone. Why they want them gone at 11 o'clock at night, I do not know. They're not going to sell the room till tomorrow morning, but they want them gone. They will not let them stay overnight. The home or hospital will normally have a local undertaker to do this work, and there is a charge to the family. Now, sometimes, obviously, I get complaint saying, I've paid all this burial money, why am I paying this £250 or £300 to this organisation to take my mum out? The simple reason is because we don't pay it. You know, your £76 a year that you're paying for burial gives you burial. It gives you a plot. It gives you that we will pick you up if we're working. And it will give you a tahara, and it will give you a minister, and it will give you a coffin and shrouds. It won't give you a collection at 2 o'clock in the morning. So somebody else does that, and that's why there is a charge. Jewish Care, we've actually got them to buy a cold bed so they can keep, unfortunately, if somebody's passed away, they can keep until the next morning. Okay, one of the things I really have a problem with is stone settings and names on stones, because I've got to stay in line with this. Somebody had a stone setting, and you can see it, well, you can't see here, but all these lovely names on the stone. It was really nice, and it looked nice. But when she went back the following week, somebody had put all black tape over the names. Families do such weird and wonderful things. Families have arguments, broiguses. And the trouble is, this is when we get stuck in the middle, because one brother is saying, I want the funeral at 2 o'clock. The other brother's saying, no, I can't make that day. I want the next day. And they think we're going to stand by and sort it out. What we do is we put the phone down and say, your problem, not ours. Sort it out. So we don't get involved in family squabbles. And I will say, this is the one time, if you're not talking to somebody, to pick up the phone and start talking. Okay? Because once somebody is actually dead and buried and gone and is finished, you won't pick that phone up. And there's nothing sadder, as far as I'm concerned, when I see people not talking, when I see brothers not talking and arguing. I cannot believe it. That mother who we just buried, is she really thinking, these are my two kids that I brought into this world? So if you've got somebody you're not talking to, don't wait for them to phone you. You phone them. You know, it's the age-old thing. Well, she hasn't phoned me for 2 months. Well, pick up the phone and phone her. You know, just be fair. You know, I just get so annoyed. It's also, we have a lot of problems with what can I have on a stone? And we've got a rabbi, Rabbi Birnbaum, who actually has to stamp the stone or stamp the permit to say it's okay what you've written. Some people want to do weird and wonderful things on the stone. We don't talk to the deceased. But also he's very flexible, which I think is one of the most important things. And, you know, a lot of people who say, oh, these rabbis, they don't understand. And he looks at things that way. Exactly the same as how Beth didn't do. When you talk to Diane Gelly, Diane Simons, Diane Binstock, they look at life that way. Although we know there are some rabbis who look at life that way, and you can't. Most of our members aren't Shomer Shabbos, let's be fair, they're not all shul goers, and they need somebody to look at life sideways. But we did have a case where a guy, actually, it was this short, which I can mention anyway. A guy had said to his wife, I don't feel well, and she said, there's nothing wrong with you. Then they went to the doctor, and he said to the doctor, I don't feel well, and the doctor said, there's nothing wrong with you. So, of course, it's all this thing. And when they're sitting around having dinner, he says, if I die, I want on my stone, I told you I was ill, which is the Spike Milligan joke. Okay. He goes to Israel and he drops dead. He's 51 years of age. What does the widow want to do now? She wants on the stone, I told you I was ill, because that's his last request. Okay, what do? We had a meeting with one of the Dayanim, and he spent an hour explaining why you can't have this. She spent the next hour telling him how she's going to have it. And in the end, we came to a compromise. Where you stand with your feet, where you've got the ledge, where you sometimes put a stone, he allowed it to go there. I told you I was ill. But what it did, it made her feel very satisfied that she's done her duty. And sadly, she also had a son that took his own life, who was 21. And even more sadder, when she got the computer, it was on the computer, what type of rope do you use? And that's the things we have to sort of deal with families. There's nothing worse. And one of the other things that I find one of the most difficult things is dealing with suicides. And we did have a run of suicides of young people, 16, 14, 18, 20. And you're dealing with families. Years ago, they used to say they'd put a suicide to the side of the cemetery or outside the cemetery. But they don't anymore. We don't do that because the families have suffered enough. We're not going to say, oh, well, as your kid commits suicide, he's got to go out there. They've suffered enough. Let's make it as easy as possible. But also, we do get young people, 25, 30, 35. Look, let's put it like this. We're all sitting here, aren't we? And I'll guarantee you one thing. We're all going to die. One of the biggest problems we have is that we won't talk about it. How many people come from that slightly different generation where I say, you don't go to the grounds while your parents are alive, or you don't do this while your parents are alive, which we know is a whole old wives' tale. But one of the major issues we have is we do not talk about death. And that's why my title is Talking About Death Won't Kill You. Because how are these youngsters going to learn about the Jewish way of dying? I keep banging on to the schools. Bring your sixth formers to Bushy. Let me talk to them for an hour. What we do. What happens when somebody dies? Because one day your children or grandchildren will see you sitting on a low chair. And they won't have a clue, really. Or sometimes you go upstairs because we've got the service now. Don't forget, when they're 13, they can be the most important person in the room because they can make up a minion. And I find it strange. We've got now Boreham Wood, we've got Shenley, we've got now Woodside Park coming on board. They're pre-bar and bat mitzvah classes. For the last few years have been coming to Bushy. And their parents come with. And what they're learning, because one of the kids actually who comes down regularly, he lost his 5-year-old sister. And what they do is at the end of the talk, he takes them down to the grave and they actually put a stone on the grave. He understands it. But you see, people try to put this fear factor of a burial ground, a cemetery. It's a frightening place. It's not a frightening place. It's one of the most comforting places you can go to. And it's also a good place to take your children or your grandchildren, if you feel they're old enough, because that's when you walk around and talk about your family. Oh, there's Auntie Flossie there. There's Uncle Joe. And you bring up conversation. And I promise you, on a nice summer's day, there's nothing nicer. Maybe I'm weird, I don't know. Strange. Even when I go on holiday, I always find a cemetery. But there's nothing nicer and more relaxing, I think, than walking a stroll around a cemetery. You notice things on the stone, and it causes conversation. You should never, ever put the fear into children of death. But we also need to talk about it. Okay, let's get rid of a myth. Excuse me. Okay. I've paid a fortune into burial is a call I get quite a lot. And then I say, oh, no, you haven't. Now we're in pantomime season. And they go, oh, yes, I have. Okay, so if somebody started in 1949, how much has he paid into burial? Any guesses? Guesses? Anyone? Sorry? 3.5 grand. 2.5 grand. Sorry? 5 grand. Okay. Going well. Oh, come on, now you're taking what's it now? We ain't that good. Okay. Any more sensible? Quite. No, sorry. Okay, I'll tell you what you paid in. You paid in £1,545. Okay. Now, to get a cremation today is just over 4 grand. You can't get a burial. So we, as a burial society, we have to make money from other ways. So how do we make our money? And I know there's a lot of, not complaints, sort of raised eyebrows when we say, okay, you want to book the stone set in. If you want a Sunday, it's £180. If you moan, have it during the week. It's £90. Simple as that. Everyone wants a Sunday. I always say to people, if you've got a terminal illness, book the stone setting. Sorry, that's my actually, sometimes I normally start the evening by saying, if I say anything to offend anyone, I apologise now, but I'm about half an hour too late. But I do. I tell it like it is. You can't skirt round death. Okay? So if you've only paid in £1,545, that's from 1949, because don't forget, some people would die after a year. So what they paid, £76. And we're going to bury them. Very nice. There'll be somebody who's lived or been a member 50, 60 years. So they've paid at least a little bit more into it. So we have to make money. So we charge for the stone setting. We also charge when the spouse wants to reserve the grave next door. Okay, the minimum we charge for a reserved grave is for a select grave is £1,400. But what we do for a spouse, we reduce it to £250, which we think is fair. Because next time when the second death occurs, it's a lot harder to dig the grave than it is the first time round when you can get a digger in, it takes half hour. Because some of them we're digging by hand, we can take up to 4 hours. Okay, we also make money from people saying, I don't want to get buried there with those, I want to get buried near the prayer hall. So they pay a premium, and some people will pay £20,000 for a space. I do not object. Not at all. And what I think when you do that, when people, there was a woman from St John's Wood, and I think many years ago actually, and she said, Mr. Hartog, I must have a pathway space. I said, is there any reason you want a pathway space? He said, yes, I don't want people to bring earth back to the flat. If that's her, Mr. Garth, who am I to complain? So we do make a lot of money from people reserving grave spaces. You can see if you go to Bushy New, there's some people right at the front, and they paid right at the front prices, which helps the Burial Society, which helps the organisation. That is my main driving thing, is to make money for the organisation that can carry on doing what it needs to do. But it's also helped to beautify the cemetery. We're about to, oh no, I won't go on that yet. Okay, so where else do we make money? One of the big things also is maintenance. Nothing worse. Okay, you walk past the stone, it says, he is so dearly missed. We loved him so much. But you're struggling to read it through the dirt because they don't keep the stone on maintenance. They don't keep it clean. They'll clean their car more times than they'll clean their parents' stone. I understand that more likely grandparents, that's the maximum people go. But how much nicer you go to the cemetery and there's a nice white stone or a clean black stone, and it's cleaned twice a year. £120? Come on. I think most people, I know the people who can't afford it, but I would say the majority can afford it. And I really want, also, one thing you might want to take it on board now is if unfortunately you've got somebody where the first person's died and then you're about to lose the second person, from the estate, pay for a lump sum for maintenance for the next 50 years and the kids haven't got to worry. If you're in an inheritance bracket, inheritance tax, that's the time it comes off your inheritance tax bill and you pay the 4,000 or 5,000 and you know that stone is going to be clean for the next 50 years and you haven't got to worry. And I always encourage people to do that. See, she's thinking about it already, aren't you? I think it's very sensible. Yeah, and because there's nothing worse, I think, than a dirty stone. I really don't like it. We don't have a problem. Provincial cemeteries have a problem of non-Jewish names on a stone. Okay, we're not supposed to put a non-Jewish name on a stone. We don't know who's Jewish and who's not Jewish. We haven't got a clue. But in the provinces, they know who's married out, and they won't put the name on the stone. And I get lots of phone calls, and they say, what do we do? Yes, we would like to say we don't have non-Jewish names on the stone, but I'm afraid we do because we can't control it. You can't say to somebody, oh, they're all Jewish. Are you sure? I'll cut your wrist on that. So we try not to do that. It's when we've done that part with the stones and everything else, we really want to sort of like look at the maintenance, as I say, not just keeping it clean, but go further afield. I just, with Bushy New, we had something happen that I've never done in my life, and hopefully I'll never do it again, is that we got a call from the Imperial War Museum to say they had remains of, which was found to be 6 Holocaust victims that were found, the remains. They were checked and it showed to be 5 adults and 1 child. And last January, we held a service with the Chief Rabbi, and there was about 1,200 people there. I don't know, anyone here go to that? Yeah. It was one of the most inspiring days I've ever been present at. And I won't go into why they had it for so many years. The Imperial War Museum, the nice thing is we got them and we were able to deal with it. And when I was pushing the coffin towards the grave and I had the survivors surrounding me, of which unfortunately one died the following week, but a lot of them said, this brings closure. This could be my mum, or this could be my dad. And when we got to the graveside, and we put it on the struts, and then we lowered the coffin, we gave them earth to put into the graveside. We couldn't let them use the shovel, so we just gave them packets of earth. So somebody was standing next to me and said, here, oh, Grandma, Grandpa, that's for you. And you see, when you hear things like that, it brings you back to reality. These people never had a burial. They could be anyone. But we were able to show people, and I promise you, to a lot of survivors, it brought closure. And it meant so much to them. Some of the sad things we do when we're dealing with youngsters. And the interesting thing when you talk about youngsters, and when I say youngsters, because I'm 71, I suppose youngsters are in their 40s now. And we get a call, non-member. Can we bury him? Okay, what do? We charge. We charge £16,000 for a non-member. Do I feel guilty? Absolutely not. Why don't I feel guilty? Because people like you. Because you pay your membership fees. And you pay your burial fees. And you've helped the United Synagogue survive and carry on. These people have done nothing. Why am I going to let them in cheap? Somebody who's been a member 40 years is more likely paid more than 20 grand into membership fees. Why am I going to discount the 16? Obviously, there'll be cases where you do discount because of the family circumstances. But if they've got 3 kids, why am I going to give a discount? Let them find it. If not, go somewhere else where it's cheaper. We're not a convenience shop. But also what I don't understand, you've all got, I won't say all, sorry, those of you who've got children, you've got grandchildren who are sort of 18, 19, 20, who have just bought their car, make sure it's insured. Oh, we're going travelling. Make sure you've got insurance, just in case. Or we're doing it. Make sure you've got any insurance you need. But nobody talks about death. Get some insurance in case, God forbid, something happens. And we've had cases where people have died abroad, they've fallen down a mountain, fallen down a hill, and we bring them back in a coffin. I have to then sit down and talk money to these people. Why am I put in that position? I shouldn't be, it's wrong, because it's not my duty. But I have to sit with the family. How can I, look, if we get a 21-year-old, under 21, they come under the parents. So that's not an issue. But say they're sort of 25, they've committed suicide or whatever. I can't charge the family 16, and I won't. But what I do say is I expect them to give a sensible donation. But I leave it up to them. Because you know what? I'll sell some grave spaces and I'll make money that way. But what I don't like is when I've got somebody of 45, 50, who had no reason why he didn't join the Burial Society. It was either laziness or I used to be a member, but then I had an argument. Or we went to reform, but I don't want to get buried reform. Not our problem. But I do sit with families and I take them through every step of the way. And the same as the office. They also take the brunt of the first phone call. I normally come in when it sort of just needs that little bit more of a shove to sort of make the people understand where we're at. But it really is, I find, one of the most rewarding things. People say to me, why are you retired? I'm 72 in a couple of weeks. Why would I retire? I absolutely love what I do. In 19 years, I start my 19th year next in a couple of weeks. This has been the best 19 years of my life. And I've had some exciting times in my life, especially in the Navy, but we won't go into those stories. And I want people to sort of just, you get one message from here. If you don't do anything and somebody dies and is not a member, the family might be making a bar mitzvah. The family might have just paid for a holiday. The family might have had to do some other things. They might be moving house. And this person who is too bloody lazy to be a member is going to put a kibosh on the whole lot. Because now, and then how they say, well, if I'm dead, I'm not worried. No, you wouldn't be worried. It's everyone else you leave behind's got the worry. And again, why are we going to give it cheap? It's not fair to you. You're paying your whack. Why shouldn't they pay their whack? So if you know anyone that doesn't belong anywhere, do me a favour, get them to do something. An interesting thing we had, was exhumations. Now, a lot of people might not get turned on by exhumations. I don't really get turned on because it's quite cold. We do it at 6 o'clock in the morning. We've had a couple of interesting ones. There was a guy, we had a call from a guy who said, my cousin is buried in a non-Jewish cemetery. And this was in 1930. What happened was this guy came from good Jewish stock and he married out. They had a child and the husband died within weeks of that child being born. So the widow, who was not Jewish, had him buried in Abney Park Cemetery. Where's Abney Park Cemetery? Sorry? See, some people admit to coming from that side of London. They know where it is. I notice a lot of you sort of stayed stunned there. So the cousin got in touch with us and said, look, this guy shouldn't be here. He came from good Jewish stock. He shouldn't be laying in a non-Jewish cemetery. So we spoke to the son who lived in the Channel Islands, which had nothing to do with the costings of the whole thing. But he lived in the Channel Islands, and he agreed that his father should be moved to a Jewish cemetery. So we got permission from the Home Office, and we went to Abney Park Cemetery about 6 o'clock in the morning. Mark Williams, our cemetery's manager, and a couple of grave diggers, and we managed to get some machinery in there, although it was a pathway we could get to the grave. And it was right by the wall, right by some flats that obviously weren't there in 1930. And we put the thing up, the lights and everything, and then a window opened from the flats. What are you doing? So I shouted back, we're from the Home Office, and she closed the window, and that was it. So the son has said, can I come along to the exhumation? It's not a request we normally grant, but this was slightly different because it's a non-Jewish cemetery, the son wasn't Jewish, and he never knew his dad. So we started digging, and we've got our coffin there, and we've got the sheet there, and we get down to the coffin, and we get down to the remains. And we're bringing up the bones, and we're building the bones in the coffin. We obviously have our cassette there, which plays the music, you know, the knee bone's connected to the thigh bone, so we knew where we were. No, we didn't really, okay? I have to be careful when I make these flippant remarks that people actually believe me. So we were building up the remains, and then we brought the skull up. And the son turned around to me and said, can I hold the skull? So I gulped, and we gave him the skull, and he said, this is the closest I've been to my dad. We then took him to Waltham Abbey. This was on the Friday, and on the Sunday, we carried out a full Jewish funeral. We had the remains in the coffin, then we put a set of shrouds, a set of tafrichim into the coffin, and we gave them full Jewish burial. Half the family were from guys, and the other half were not Jewish. And the son wrote to me and said, dear Melvyn, one can never be certain of how one will react to emotional events, and yes, I did have some apprehensions. But thanks to the kindness, care and sympathetic approach of you and your colleagues, the events of last Friday and Sunday were the most momentous and memorable in my life. Thank you for allowing me to be present and so bringing me close to a Father I never knew, and for helping him and me achieve a special peace. Now, you can't get better than that, really. There was also a guy called Leon Greenman. Well, actually, I meant to read this out. Sorry, I remember saying this when I talk about my attack last week. This was a few years ago in Haifa. The murder this week of the head of Haifa's Burial Society left the northern community grieving. Okay, so I shouldn't really complain about my whack on the head. There was a guy called Leon Greenman who worked at the Jewish Museum. He was the only British survivor from Auschwitz. He married a Dutch girl, and he was living in Holland when the Germans took over Holland, and he was sent to the concentration camp. His wife was murdered, and his son was murdered. He survived the camps, and he always said when he came out, that he would always tell the story of what happened. I got a call to say he'd died. Would we bury him? He actually belonged to the Liberal. But funny enough, where I said, okay, look, the guy's done wonders all his life to sort of teach people, and I think that was very important. But where we selected to bury him, which was actually quite good near the Prayer Hall at East Ham, just where the war graves are, was his brother, which I thought was also rather strange. And the social worker for Leon Greenman, he lived on his own all his life. And she said to me, I know he's got something that he wanted to be buried with. So we went to his house searching high and low, and we found this package. And it actually said, very, very careful, a victim's ashes from Buchenwald Nazi camp, 1945. And it actually said, when Buchenwald concentration camp was liberated by the Americans, General Patton's Third Army, on April 11th, 1945, I, Leon Greenman, Auschwitz survivor 98288, was wandering about the campgrounds when I came across the ovens in which were remains of prisoners cremated. Behind me where I was standing were 4 large wooden containers filled to the top with the remains of ashes of comrade prisoners. I could not help but to take some of these pieces of bone, almost ashes. It proves the truth of what went on in these Nazi concentration camps. Leon Greenman, Auschwitz survivor 98288. And so when we opened it from this brown package, there was a small box. When we opened the box, there was ashes and you could see little bits of bone, and also there was a strip of the blue and white uniform. When I held that, I had this coldness go down me, knowing that somebody had actually worn this in the camps. It was more likely cremated. So what we did, we actually went back to his grave, this is a couple of months afterwards, and we dug 2 foot down into the grave. And we put this box and we buried it with Leon, because that's what he wanted. And actually, there's a small stone on the front of the stone saying that these remains were buried with Leon. And again, that's one of those stories that you feel it just hits you. One of my heroes was a guy called Harry Himes. We know Harry Himes. So, he built Centrepoint or designed it, or he built it, which is a lot more money. Very nice English guy. He's not English, he's Jewish, but he's a very nice English type guy. So he wanted to get buried at Willesden. He wasn't a member, which pleased me even more. And he wanted to face that way. We were burying everyone this way. So he bought right at the front. And I said, well, Harry, I didn't call him Mr. Hartog, actually, I got to know him, so I called him Harry. He called me Mr. Hartog. I said, you're going to have to buy 2 graves, because we're obviously going to go that way, which is taking up 2 grave spaces. He went, okay. As he left £500 million, it obviously wasn't too much of a guess. But it turned out the reason was, over there was his parents' grave. and he's had exactly the same stone put on his grave. So unless you know that, you know what I mean, it wouldn't register. But when you see it, it's quite remarkable. And when I promise you now, as a shul, one of the first things you do when the weather breaks, arrange a tour of Willesden. What we're doing with the Heritage Lottery Fund is remarkable. The whole front has changed. There's going to be a sort of small museum. There's going to be classes. It's going to be wonderful when it's finished. I promise you. Get involved in going to Willesden, and don't forget the charity boxes you see en route. We've only got to make up a few pound on that. But it's a fascinating cemetery. There's so many fascinating people buried there. My favourite stone is Rosalind Franklin. And Rosalind Franklin was correct. She is the one that really discovered DNA. And she died when she was 36. And she's buried in Willesden in the Franklin enclosure. The whole family were communal people. And again, it's great when you read the stone and you understand the family. So we've also got Michael Winner. Why, I do not know. But he actually got buried in his mother's space, who didn't use it. So that was fine. I could live with that. We used to have a problem with coroners. And everyone knows about Mary Hassel. Okay, let me tell you, Mary Hassel is a reformed coroner. And we don't have a problem with that. But one thing we do have is a guy called Shlomo Zanitsky. Now, Shlomo Zanitsky is our middleman for dealing with coroners. So if somebody requires a post-mortem, we speak to Shlomo, who will speak to the coroner. And the first thing he says to the coroner, would you accept the findings of a scan to save this person being cut in a post-mortem? Now, interestingly, we pay for the scan. We spend over £40,000 a year to make sure our members are not cut having a post-mortem. Sometimes they still have to have a post-mortem because the findings from the scan aren't conclusive. So, that will happen. But Shlomo, or is known to the coroner as Sydney, we call him Shlomo, he has saved so many members from having the post-mortem. The guy's just remarkable. And we gave him we had a celebration or an evening reception at the Chief Rabbi's home with all the coroners that could come along, including the Chief Coroner, His Honour Judge Lucraft. And we presented Shlomo with an honorary award from the Chief Rabbi. If there's one guy that deserves any type of gong, it's him, because he doesn't charge us anything. And it's not just us he deals with. He does with the Federation, with the Adus, with the Muslims. They all speak to Sydney or Shlomo. He is absolutely a star, and he does very well from us. So the coroners we don't have major problems with. Our burials in Israel, we've got 2 plots left, 2 single plots, male only. So if you're female, you can't get buried there. We're in 2 minds, do we buy more spaces? But they want the money up front, which would cost us $500,000. So we're not too keen, because it took us about 7 years to sell the 146 plots we bought originally. So, and they are on average now about £10,000 a plot, which is not too bad, it's quite cheap, half the time. We were going to put funerals on the internet, but then we thought you lazy Watsits would sit in your offices and watch it there, so we won't do it. I'm just surprised that nobody's actually asked a question yet. There must be one somewhere. Yes, somebody with a question. Good.
Something you haven't mentioned, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that by an act of Parliament, United Synagogue is required to bury any Jewish person who does not have. Oh, have I jumped in too soon?
No,
I can carry on.
Wonderful.
That any Jewish person who passes away who does not have any family or any money, and therefore cannot pay anything, but you are required to bury that Jewish person with the full ceremony as required. Is that correct?
Right. Firstly, if there's a person who comes to us with no family, no nothing, Holocaust survivor, or somebody who's got no children or nothing, I promise you, we will bury them. Okay? But it's not an act of Parliament, which everyone else thought it was. So, of course, if somebody phoned the Federation and said, this person's died, here's the phone number of the United Synagogue, because they've got to do it because of the Act of Parliament. Absolute rubbish. Because I went with David Fry and we've checked everything, and it is not an Act of Parliament. So we don't have to do it. If we choose to do it out of the kindness of our heart, because we think it's right, I promise you we will do it. But if that person who's died has got a relative in Raynham or Ballsmore Lane or the Adus, let them do it. And we've now encouraged by meetings with the Board of Deputies and the other funeral organisations to say, come on, mate, take part. I know that we will do the majority because we're the largest. I accept that. Okay, but I want them to take their share of doing a charity funeral. They call it a mace mitzvah. Okay, let them do a few mace mitzvahs in the future. Hopefully we don't have too many, but I promise you we'll never turn a Jew away who's got no resources.
People think I'm strange because I say I don't want to be buried in the ground with the worms and I don't want to be cremated. Is there such a thing as a Jewish mausoleum?
No, but interesting in Israel, isn't it? In Jerusalem.
I don't know.
No, they've got that part that they bury in the wall. They do that, but we don't. I promise you, the worms they're very, they're very good to us, and I promise you, they've never eaten anyone alive. It's. I'll tell you something. I'd prefer that to cremation because just in case I wake up, I don't want to be cremated. But I promise you, people. It's interesting you say that. People do have a fear of being buried. My grandmother, her fear was that she would still be alive, and she said that she wanted her wrists cut to make sure she was dead. I said, Grandma, don't worry, we'll make sure you're dead.
Yes. Mr. Hartog, first of all, thank you for a very interesting, informative, and also humorous talk on a subject which is not difficult to either talk about or for us to listen to. I'd like to just mention something which is pertinent to this evening. Many people may not even be aware of it, that the government have brought in a new law from this coming April, where if you wish not to donate your organs, you have to fill in a form, which I've already done online. It's very simple, in order to opt out of organ donation. This is something which is obviously
personal.
Yes, yeah. Indeed. And people should be made aware of it, and possibly United Synagogue might wish to publicise that fact.
I think we'll obviously wait for the Beth Din to come out with that one. I think it's got to be their rule. It's certainly way above my grade to come out with that answer. But interestingly, somebody else said, it won't make any difference to burial if people do donate their organs. They will still get buried. We've had people that donate their brain. I was very fortunate. It didn't come into my domain. But we make no difference there, and we're still burying. If a person actually decides to donate their organs, they would still have a Jewish burial. I have a friend actually 18 years ago had a heart transplant. Now, nobody would say to him, do you want to donate anything? Well, of course he would, because of what he was given. He was given life. And I think sometimes we think of things like that, that if we can help people in our death, is that such a bad thing? But it's all an individual choice, it really is. Nobody should be put down or get any grief if they say, no, I don't want to do it.
On the way to Bushy Cemetery off the A41, between the A41 and Little Bushy Lane, is it? Sandy Lane, that's right. When are they going to sort out the trees which will allow the Kohanim to drive up that lane? It's been like that for a couple of years now.
Actually, I thought we did.
Not as I'm aware of.
We did. I'll tell you, seriously, I think we did. But in all honesty, as a Kohen, to save any sort of worry, just go round by Costco. Exactly. There you go, it's easy. But yeah, I thought the trees were cut back, but I will double check on that. Also, you've got to be aware now, when you go to Bushy New, there's actually maps where you can walk for Kohanim, and Bushy Old, we've got maps, and we've got lines. We're going to take one of them away because they didn't need to be there. But there's going to be tram lines excuse me, there's going to be tram lines, so walk between the lines and you'll be perfectly safe. You won't be struck down by anyone. Maybe a falling pole, but nothing else.
Two things. Interesting, my grandparents in Switzerland are buried in a cemetery where men and women are buried on different sides. Is there anything like that in the UK?
No. Interestingly, in our plot in Eretz Chaim, they will only bury a woman next to a woman, and a man next to a man. With our arguments in our families, I think we'd have a lot of problems there. But it's not a minhag we can change, really. And let's be fair, do we need to change it? If we were the Adas, it's something they would more likely get involved with. But I don't think it's anything we would do.
And the second thing is, can you comment on Seamus? I mean, we're often told, because we've got tons of books here to get rid of, that we can't because Bushy won't take them.
Not strictly true, but this Irish bloke comes up all the time. Sorry for any Irish people, sorry, just one of my in-jokes. Nowadays, we get more Seamus than we ever did years ago. Years ago, when we did a burial, we would bury a bag of Seamus because that guy was Shomer Shabbos, went to shul every week, and we would bury the books with him. Nowadays, we have so many books. It is unbelievable when we changed from the red siddur to the green siddur, and then the Yiska booklets and this and that, and photocopies that don't need to be buried. So we actually now bury with every funeral we do. We actually dig deeper, and then we put the Seamus in, then we put the earth in on top, so you don't even know you've got it. But in some time in future, you'll have something to read. It reminds me, I was just thinking, how can you read if it's below you? And it reminds me the story I heard where some guy was going around, his mother-in-law just died, and he was really sort of slacking off. He was being really nasty, and somebody said to him, be careful. If you carry on, she's going to dig her way out and haunt you. He said, let her dig. I buried her face down. Sorry. But with the Seamus, if you've got a call, give me a shout and we'll get it done. Because what we do sometimes, if we've got a load, we'll dig a pit and we'll put it all in there. But we do our shuls to check the Seamus, that it is Seamus.
And can I ask you on the developments with the transferability of burial rights? I was once on that committee. Where have we reached so far?
Yes, another good question. Okay, what the Spencer is saying, if somebody, let's say, belongs to the United Synagogue and relocates to Brighton and wants to join Brighton Shul and their burial, we will send to Brighton Burial Authority 80% of what you've paid into burial. Now, if you live in Manchester or live anywhere else or belong to the Federation or belong to the Adas, they will not reciprocate. They will not refund any money at all. Now, there's a lot of people up north who have lived there, but all the kids have come south and they want to come down. And these, if it's a provincial one like Swansea, they've got no money. Okay, so we accept that. So what I do, when I look at how much the buying is, I will do the best I can on a reduction to help them be able to join a burial society. And it's much easier to get them to be members of the burial society rather than getting a call saying this person has died and he doesn't belong anywhere. So it'll cost us a lot more. So we try and encourage membership in that way.
I'll take the opportunity. I'll take the opportunity, and you will obviously help us, that we can do with some more volunteers for the Chevra Kadisha network.
Okay. Interestingly, because we've got two problems here, because you've got one northwest and one northeast. Northwest, you've got a lot more Shomer Shabbos people. Okay. Now, what we do insist is that people, if they're going to go on the Chevra Kadisha, they should be Shomer Shabbos. Now, for the women, that is a little bit easier because the women are a group. So they're not dealing in a shul. But here, like Edgware, for example, they've got their own U&E deal with your members. And another, like Stanmore, will only deal with Stanmore members. Whereas the ladies will deal with anyone. They haven't got a clue who they're doing the Tahara for. I know there's some shores that are struggling to get people who are Shomer shoppers and people who would like to help, but they've been told they don't qualify. So I'm having a meeting with Diane Gelly, because on the northeast side of London, where it's even harder to get Shomer shoppers people, is that they've allowed people that want to do it, but sort of keep something. You know, they're sort of trying, really, to do the best they can. So whether Diane Gelly would relent a little bit over here, I do not know. But other than that, we could hit a problem with some of the men in some of the shores. They will struggle to get a chevra together. So we are looking at it. I understand it. But yes, if you are Shomer Shabbos, it's not everyone's cup of tea to be able to do a Tahara. But I'll tell you something, if you do a Tahara, you will walk out of that mortuary feeling so good that you've done something so special.
You were talking about joining the Burial Society or being a member of the Burial Society, and then you're talking about, obviously, you've only got a couple of US shawls outside of London. Can you, I've been told you can't, pay into the Burial Society without a US shawl membership?
No.
Why?
Because most people would leave the United Synagogue because they wouldn't want to be members.
But if you've got somebody in the provinces, you haven't got that facility. If most of you are down here and you have somebody who's out in the provinces, you have a problem.
Hang on, you're losing me a little bit here. So I don't know how you explain it. Are you talking about if somebody goes to Brighton? When you're saying join locally, you mean up north where he is? Yeah, but that would be his burial, would be up there, not down here. Then he's got to belong to a member shore here. He's got to belong to a United Synagogue shore. Got to.
So when you said it's £1,500 over many years, it's not thousands because you've got to do one to the other. It's a connection. You can't just belong. You're just not paying into the Burial Society.
You must look for anyone to be a member of the Burial Society. You must belong to United Synagogue shore. If somebody goes to Brighton and wants to be buried in Brighton, fine, we'll transfer money. If somebody who lives up in Scotland, whose parents are down here, and God forbid a million times something happens up there, and you say as parents, I want him to be buried down here because we live down here, he would be classed as a non-member. That's the only way you can do it. Or you negotiate with your shore for a decent deal, and you pay the shore bill and you pay the burial bill. So God forbid anything happen, you...
And can I just say, I think it's true that the United Synagogue is always willing to negotiate with provincial shores on reciprocal arrangements. Some accept it and some don't. So that, for example, Bournemouth, I know, has an arrangement with the United Synagogue, but some of the other others...
Bournemouth have, Brighton have, Southend have, the West Country don't have, a couple in Manchester do, a couple in Manchester don't.
But the option is open to them, and some of them haven't taken it.
Look, we're a membership organisation.
Yeah.
So sensibly, if we're a membership organisation, we will do everything we can to help somebody become a member, because otherwise we'd be shooting ourselves in the foot. Members years ago, when you all joined as youngsters, a couple of years ago, it was, well, you joined because of burial. It's not like that anymore. So rabbis have got their work cut out, and shores have got their work cut out to hold on to members and to encourage new members. They've got to look at everything. As I say to rabbis when we do any training, what you do when somebody loses a loved one is you're either making a member or you're losing a member by what you do. And rabbis have really got to step up to the plate now, and really, it's no good just turning up for the Lavoie and doing one night shiver and never seeing them again. It doesn't work like that. You must encourage them, because a lot of these people have got children. And that's why I say when you're at the cemetery, we get the rabbis to do the right type of service as well, which will encourage people to sort of have something more going with them.
I understand that Cohens get buried next to the pathway, but what is the advantage of pre-booking a plot?
Choice. A Cohen, yes, will get buried next to a pathway, but if you're saying, I want to select a plot now, well, we're going to charge you. You're selecting a plot. If you don't want to do that, don't, and we'll bury you in a Cohen spot. So you might be saying, well, actually, I like this section here, so I'll buy these plots now. I'd sooner spend 10 grand and get these 2 plots rather than taking the risk in 30 or 40 years' time, and I might be in Plotsville. So you can do that.
End.
Stock Road.
Yes, Stock Road, just opposite the waste disposal.
Yeah.
Refuge collection.
I suppose that's another way people go, I don't know.
Yes, and I had a email with a photo of my mother's stone, which was blown over. And they said it's my responsibility to resurrect it, which I did. And then they said, well, it also knocked down the stone behind. And I said, well, that's an act of God.
Actually, that's a good one. It's because the stone actually belongs to the family. It's nothing to do with us. Okay, if one of our trucks or somebody knocks it down, we'll do it. But one thing we are looking at, and I promise you we're looking at it seriously, is to start off some sort of insurance. So therefore we'll cover your stone no matter what, and we'll charge X amount on top of what we...
Regretfully, the last few years has seen a significant rise in anti-Semitism. I'm not aware, I know Manchester has had stones defaced, but there are other countries where there's significant defacing. Some only, I think last week was in France. I can't remember. So what security can you install to try to prevent these terrible things happening?
Okay, we had a run, it must be 10, 15 years ago now, at West Ham, where over 500 stones were overturned. We also had a load of swastikas at Aldershot Cemetery, which is a military cemetery. And we had swastikas on the war graves. How much can you do? Okay, in East Ham, Willesden, Bushy and Waltham Abbey, we have CCTV. But the disused cemeteries, we don't have any electricity. So you can't cover it. We try to do the best we can because we have staff going in there regularly. Okay, but I promise you, if some idiot wants to get in, they'll get in. But thank God, Bushy is sort of out. It's difficult to get to unless you go by car or anything. So you haven't got a council estate round the corner or some pub that they're all meeting at. Whereas a sort of East Ham, West Ham and Plashet is more of a problem. But thank God we don't suffer too much with that. We'll get the odd one maybe at Willesden and we deal with it the best we can. But there are, I know some cemeteries that are getting a lot of problems with this. But thank God we've got people, certainly with all the 4 main surgeries, that people live on site as well. But a good example, Bushy New. Okay, just where the gates are, where you drive into the car park, there's a public footpath and a driveway. And we watched on CCTV when this van reversed up and they lifted the gates off their hinges and they put it on the car and drove out. You can't cover every eventuality, but it's just one of those things. Sometimes you just have to accept. Look, the bloke got into the Queen's bedroom. You can't get a more secure place. So what chance have we got? But I promise you, we do try our best.
A little bit of PR work that you could probably do on our behalf. I hit a certain birthday a few years ago, and the next thing I know, I get 10, 12 cold calls every week. Can we offer you life insurance? Me, why? So your family won't have to pay for your burial. Me, Have you done your demographics? I'm Jewish. If you phone anyone Jewish, and I believe anyone Muslim, we don't have to pay a penny for our funerals. Oh, I never knew that. So perhaps that's something you could do on our behalf to stop us getting all these calls of people really wanting to help our families pay for our funerals.
Bloody hell, I've got enough job on that anyway. Actually, you do pay for your burial, your funeral expenses scheme. But yeah, look, it's just a cold call. These people just do cold calls. We all get them. We all put the phone down. We try not to be rude. But believe it or not, there will be people they phone that do not have cover.
The Sephardi's tend to lay their stones flat, and you, the Orthodox, still have them upright. Have you had any thoughts on whether to follow the Sephardi? Because I know up in Birmingham, no, in Sheffield, they share a cemetery, and they've now brought a rule in that all headstones have to be laid flat.
The one major problem with having flat stones, as far as I'm concerned, if I'm walking around the cemetery, I can spot things. I can spot names, and you can spot names. If you've got flat stones, you're walking around like this, sort of like looking for a name and looking for a person. And it's not our minhag, it's not our way. It's the same as the Sephardi bury two in a grave. We won't do that. Yeah, there you did. No, there you go. See, you learned something tonight. Tonight was worthwhile to you. But we don't. It's not our thing. And I know Edgware Bury Lane. You've got Sephardi and you've got Reform. The Reform have uprights, and the Sephardi are flat. But to be fair, we do charge a tax on stones. Okay, but that's another way that we bring money in to the organisation. So you order a stone, a percentage of that will be a tax. All right. So hang on, just before I go, I want to thank Spencer for allowing me the privilege of coming here to talk to you. It's taken me 15 years to get here. But I really want to thank you, because I don't care if there's 5 people in an audience. The most important thing is that you understand a little bit more about what we do as your burial society. And also I think it's important that people always say to me at the end, I didn't think it would be like that, because they think it's going to be all sort of tears and sad and everything else. But I hope I've proved to you that really, whilst I'm dealing with death every day, you know, life is fun. If you wake up in the morning, you know what? You've had a result. Because the day you don't wake up, that's it. There's no second chance. This is not a rehearsal. And don't forget, if you've got a member of your family you are not talking to, give them a call. I wish you a very, very happy 2020 in the non-Jewish world. And you should only have good health. For you here, I won't say that to everyone. No, that would be wrong. I really do wish you good health. And from your children, you should only have knuckers and you enjoy your life.
Now, I don't think we ought to wait till 4 o'clock in the morning to hear a French voice, so I'm going to call on Nicole Duke to give the vote of thanks now.
A token of our appreciation, usually we give some whiskey, but we can't force you to drink whiskey if you like Bartonura. Okay? It's pop, but I hope this will help you to get better. And really, we appreciate that you came here today. You had an ordeal, you had a rough week, and you still maintain your talk. And I think it was very interesting. Everybody took something out of it. Thank you very much, and thank you for being a wonderful boss. Thank you.